Welcome to the Patel Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Harsh Patel. I have obtained a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and minors in biology and biochemistry. Through that education, this podcast allows me to deliver proper health, science, and self-improvement information to the people around the world. If you have liked any of my podcast episodes, and if you would like to show support, the only way to do so is by subscribing to my YouTube channel and the social media platforms of the guests you have liked. You really don't want to miss on the highly intellectually stimulating conversations that we'll be having in future episodes. Next is David Ian Howe. David has obtained a master's degree in anthropology, and he studies hunter-gatherers, their tools, and their dogs. This has been a fascinating conversation from the perspective of anthropology, evolution, and culture. Apart from that, David communicates science to the general public on various social media platforms. He also uses humor, which makes his content really unique. You can expect to learn how dogs became domesticated and how the shape of the tools varies with the geographical location of Earth. You can also expect to learn if we had sex with Neanderthals and much more. And now, my conversation with David Ian Howe. Welcome, David, to an episode of this. I'm really excited to talk about anthropology and ethnocyanology. What's your reason behind that username on Instagram? Like, I didn't know what ethnocyanology is.
Sure. Ethno, like meaning people, and then cynology would be the study of dogs. It's Greek, but just like anthropology is Greek for study of humans. But yeah, ethnocyanology it's not really like a field you can major in. It's just like it's a discipline, I guess, or a subject, and it means like the study of dogs in human cultural contexts. So cynology would be studying dog science and like anatomy and behavior, but ethnocyanology is specifically human culture and dogs.
Interesting, because that's like so different from like I don't want to say like maybe mainstream, but like I always think about these disciplines in terms of like you can major in or like you can go for like your grad school or professional school in. So like this is a really different like approach, and I just want you to tell us a little bit like why were dogs important to humans as far back as we can go. Like this is so interesting. Why were dogs important? What I also understand from your point of view that like they were kind of a lineage from wolves. So I just want to give I just want you to give like a whole picture of why dogs.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Boston Dynamics like dog robot they use in New York City now, like with the policing?
I have just looked at the videos, but I don't actually know what they do.
Sure, but like the little robotic dogs that walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a technology, like a clear modern like computer chip mechanical technology. I look at actual organic dogs as a fundamental like human technology. And like if you've ever seen a border collie work and herd sheep and doing it, you can't train that Boston Dynamics robot to do that yet. But 20,000 years ago, you had a living, breathing animal that like would do that at a whistle, and like I find that fascinating. And I would say, to answer your question, really, there's three fundamental human technologies, and that is stone tools, tools in general, dogs, and then agriculture. And then we could say the internet too, probably, but that's more recent. But yeah, dogs are like they're a wolf that scavenged human camps, and then we exploited that honestly technological resource because if you feed them, they stay and they guard your camp. They can sniff things out that we can't smell or stuff that we can't see from afar, and they can carry things. They can hunt for us. It's a fundamental technology.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Like that sounds really fascinating because I was wondering what an actual human wolf interaction would have been back then. Do you have any idea of what that would be like?
Um, Yes and no. This is an issue with archaeology, is stuff that we see today, and paleontology too, in a way. Stuff that we see today, like wolves that are in Yellowstone National Park or that are wild in Minnesota, they're fundamentally like still in a human environment. They can't go too far. They got to cross highways. It's not as it would have been 100,000 years ago. So that behavior, we can infer what it was like in the past based on that to an extent, but it might not be exactly as it was. But wolves are often skittish of humans. They don't want to go near you, but they come to us if they have food resources. You can see that with like a coyote, they scavenge. But that interaction in the past would have been, you could hear wolves hunting something or like ripping the carcass apart. Like you'd hear that. You could see it from afar. Clearly, you would hear them howling at night. And in that sense, they're very social animals. And in every human culture, they do often see wolves as like a noble, um, like loyal and like charismatic animal, and
Mhm.
cunning, I would say. So we saw them as ourselves in a sense, or very, very close to us as like kin. And that interaction would have been like probably one of reverence and respect. But when they came close to camp, it would have been like, well, if you're gonna bite my kid, like I gotta take you out. So that would have, aggressive wolves would have been taken out, or if they were too skittish, they would have stayed away. But the ones that were a little more docile and less timid would have eventually become dogs based on like our interactions with them.
Well, that's like natural selection at play, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And
That's
it's
wow.
fascinating because it could be natural, but it also could be selective
Artificial.
breeding. Yeah.
Right.
Artificial. Yeah.
Artificial. I haven't thought about in that sense about dogs ever because I read Sapiens
Okay.
uh, from forgot the author's name. It's long.
Uh, Dawood Hari is his name.
Yeah,
Okay.
but in that it was something about dogs, but I can't remember. It was like a couple years ago. But it was so interesting how like we could just force selection. Like this is one of the examples, obviously, of how like humans force selection. You mentioned wolves are really social animals.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if what what would have had to be done for a wolf to become a dog. Like obviously it's a long process, but dogs are not that, they are social, but they have to live with humans. So
Mhm.
they have to be with humans and not other dogs. And so the species, so they don't have so basically they don't have much interaction with their own species. So how does that play a role?
Dogs don't have that much interaction with the wolf species, you mean?
Yeah, like how, what was that back then?
Yeah. So back in the day would have all been wolves. And there would have been wolves that were again like a little more docile, and maybe like humans would name them or they would be more familiar with them. And like, I think I said this in my lecture, but if one's missing an ear, like you would remember it, maybe you gave it a name. um and that would have been just closer to a natural wolf that likes to scavenge. It's a little more docile. But over time, and this is with every domestic animal, they begin to show signs of like domestication syndrome, is what it's like referred to.
Mm,
And that is the juvenilization of an animal and the docilization. So like cows mostly lost their horns, goats which came from ibex, like they lost like they're more like robust and like aggressive looking traits. Mouflon became sheep. Like horses kind of stayed the same, but like wild pigs are definitely more wild than a docile like domestic pig. And like their ears start to flop down, their coats start to change color. So essentially you're breeding something to be more juvenile into adulthood. And over time, wolves would have progressively began to like shrink. A fundamental way to tell the difference between a dog and a wolf skeletally is wolves have a longer jaw and maxilla, but dogs, it starts to scrunch in and they have what's called tooth crowding. So their teeth become more crowded together and it's just that shrinking. So if you think of a puppy has a smaller face and it eventually grows out, domestic animals, it doesn't grow out any further. But they still reach adulthood. So they maintain those like happy, cute traits. And that's like what dogs became over or wolves became over time into dogs. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. If is that any way similar to how we evolved from the great apes, like our face shape, our like anatomy of the face?
That's an interesting point you bring up because I was speaking with a friend a couple of weeks ago on our podcast, and he actually a couple months ago now. He brought up a point, and it was a paper. I can't remember the author, but humans compared to our ancient ancestors show those exact same domestic features. Um, like our ears didn't flop down, but obviously we're all different colors. We like have different shapes and sizes, but mostly our faces are just completely scrunched together, more so than like a chimp or a gorilla, or older hominids. So there's a debate: are we domesticated? And obviously, we started sitting down in villages. We're not um, like foraging as much as we used to, but in 10,000 years, that's not that much time to evolve. But at the rate humans can like reproduce, like it there are some changes that have happened for sure.
Yeah.
And it's to say that we're more docile than our ancient ancestors, I have no idea. But there's probably more trauma on skeletons today than there were in the past, I would guarantee. But
Yeah. So do you think there's like the food sources changed over time for both species? Because dog food now right now is like crunchy and
yeah.
but like back in like wolves are eating, I'm gonna say like wildlife in my assumption. Like their diet is more of like, I don't know, like uncooked and raw.
Mm.
And for dogs, it would be what would humans eat. And humans would primarily eat cooked food, but it also depends on what point that merging happened. So that's kind of an interesting, like a thought experiment. But any ideas on
Yeah.
that?
So with humans, we were eating raw meat. We were eating just raw vegetables forever until about 1 million years ago. Homo erectus, to our knowledge, is the first to utilize fire. It's a site in China called Zhejiang, and like they found a fire pit there. And about 1 million years onward, we see fire everywhere. And in that case, you have a second stomach. You have something to cook and digest the food for you, and then you eat it. And rather than your stomach having to waste a bunch of calories to process that raw food down, we just get the pure nutrients because it's easier to digest. Um, and therefore, our faces and our teeth were more able to be shrunk like they are now. Like we don't have giant canines and molars like gorillas do to chew bamboo. We have a second stomach that's just fire. So furthermore, we then start agriculture 10,000 years ago ish, mostly, or all around the world at the same time. And that quickly spreads. And you now have like a more grain based diet, which is why a lot of people are gluten intolerant. We haven't really caught up to processing that complex protein in our stomachs every day, because you would usually just eat some seeds you found. Um, Now, mass processing that. So, in the 10,000 years that we've been eating that food, um, dogs have also, they've been around for 20,000 years. So, dogs have been eating gluten and like grains and breads just as long as we have. So, like, their stomach is just as much adapted, maybe more, to eating that stuff than us
Mhm.
because they breed faster and they have shorter lifespans. And yeah. So, they're, a friend of mine calls them like human trash compactors, or sorry, like small trash compactors, because they literally eat whatever we throw on the ground and they don't die. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes, but
Yeah. What's the deal with like these allergies with like different kind of meats with dogs? Like if a dog could be
uh,
allergic to chicken, like you know what? Like some dogs
yeah,
could be allergic to chicken. Like why would that be the case? Because they're animals. Like they're from wolves objectively, but like why would that be?
I'd say it's the same way. I should say preface. I don't have an answer to that I
Mhm.
know of, but my guess would be that like humans are allergic to things as well. And a lot of it, my personal opinion too, would be that like we think, oh, that kid's got a peanut allergy. He's like, I think before it'd be seen as like he's weak. But really, I would see it as like peanuts have evolved to like keep predators away from eating them. And that's kind of what pollen is to me. When you have pollen allergy, like the tree doesn't want you cutting it down and stuff like that. So, or eating it. So
Mhm.
it doesn't want that. So I would say that like in the wild, if a wolf is allergic to chicken, it's like the chicken's way of saying like, don't eat me. Um, that I could be completely off base, but I would view it that way more so than like someone just randomly can't digest chicken, which could also be the case, but
Yeah.
that's just mutation. But
Yeah. So what about stone tools? What's your research on, or what was your
yeah,
research on during your master's, and tell us about that.
yeah, that's kind of a complex thing to answer, but I would say like stone tools are probably 3 million years old, but definitely 2 million years old. And it starts with just cracking a rock in half to have that sharp edge. Then it gets more complex and um, fundamentally stone or like the nappable, like flint napping is the process of reducing stone into a shape. Um, that kind of rock that's malleable like that is a result of being like compressed seabed from billions of years ago, millions of years ago, full of plankton and little silica like organisms. And because of that, the rock is brittle. So like shock waves are allowed to like more easily travel through it, which makes it fracture the way it does. Because you can't just like hit a boulder that way and expect it to, break off like that.
Hmm.
Um, so humans have to look for that kind of stone, or they look for obsidian, which is just volcanic glass, fractures the same way. It's essentially the same principle as if a rock hits your windshield on your car and it fractures in that like spider web like sense. Flint napping is just controlling the direction of that crack. Um, so people figured that out. If you've ever tried it, it's very hard to do. It takes a long time to learn.
I've seen one of
So,
your reels.
oh, yeah, it's complex. So, like when I think of humans in the past, even hominids like Homo erectus, they had a big ass brain. Like they had to. I'm sorry for my language, but
That's
like
okay.
they had to. Cool. Like they had to think about that. You have to step forward. My friend calls it like reverse 3D chess. Like it's complex. So these people like clearly were intelligent. And it's just interesting to me that that was a fundamental technology for so long, and we just forget it. Like we don't know how, I mean, you
Yeah.
could argue using a cell phone is an evolution of using stone tools, but yeah, or a screwdriver or a knife. But yeah, it's interesting. But my research, I try to put this shortly. You can identify ancient cultures based on their stone tools. So all their clothing, their obviously language, their skin, like their housing all dwindles away. You lose it to time because it's organic. It just washes away. So even like the arrow shaft that an arrow stone tool was attached to is gone. All we have are those stone points.
Hmm.
So every culture kind of made their stone tools a specific way. So we can say, okay, these people are early archaic foragers from Tennessee. These people are Mississippian corn farmers that make their arrowheads a certain way 1,000 years ago. Um, it's a rough estimate. We can kind of base cultures off of that because they do make them regionally distinct. But then there's issues of like maybe one guy just made his point a little differently, or like he wasn't as good,
Hmm.
or she wasn't as good, and like it varies. But my thesis was looking at um, there's a debate whether the bow and arrow was invented. Right, let's start with this. You know what an atlatl is?
Oh, sorry, what?
An atlatl
No.
or spirit thrower. Have you ever used like a dog tennis ball thrower thing?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's that. It's just a piece of wood that you attach a spear to, and instead of the tennis ball, you throw a spear. And
So.
it's so you have like your bicep, you have this part of your arm, your hand, and then you have another piece. So you get all that kinetic energy to store and throw the thing. It's a lever device that is very old. That's a very old human technology, and you need bigger points on the end to use it right. Um, but that we think. But then the bow and arrow is more recent. It's a more complex technology in my eyes, and it appears possibly 70,000 years ago in Africa, but we know it's like 12,000 years old in Europe and Asia. There's no, and you see small like arrowhead sized things all over Europe and Asia at that time. In the Americas, there's no small points at all until about 1,000 years ago. So the debate is like, did they have the bow and arrow or not from getting to America, or did it get invented 1,000 years ago? So my thesis looked at, what if I huge big points off of an arrow and like progressively getting smaller, because that's what happens over time in the archaeological record. Like the deeper you go, the bigger the points are. The shallower you dig, the smaller they are. So
Why is that the case? Sorry.
No, you're fine. That was like the exact question of my thesis. And we don't know. I would imagine when agriculture starts spreading about 1,000 years ago, like the Maya invent corn, or not the Maya, the ancient Mesoamericans, and that spreads throughout North America and South America, you start getting people that are now no longer foraging and moving all over. They're sitting in small spots farming corn, beans, and squash. And when that arable land or those crops fail, there's a lot more warfare because you have to take over the next village to get their land. And like that's still going on today. So, I mean, humans just, we invade other countries for resources essentially. So, yeah. And like at that point, you don't need big points to, and that big atlatl thing to shoot mammoth or shoot deer. So mammoths, you need a big point, and then it gets very much smaller after they die out. They get a little bit smaller. They're still big, and you use that for hunting deer and bison with that spear thrower. But 1,000 years ago, they get very small. And I think that personally has to do with like the bow was invented or spread around then because of warfare, because you can carry way more arrows than you can darts or spears. And I guess the gist of my thesis was trying to see, can you shoot those large points off of a bow and arrow, to see like if the original like Clovis hunters that came here that were hunting mammoths, maybe they had bows and arrows too. And the thesis said that absolutely, yes, you can shoot those big spearheads off of arrows. So we really don't know. My hunch is that they still didn't have it. The bow was invented later, but my thesis basically says that they could have.
Yeah. So are there different types of tools? Like, did they have, at what point do you think like we had variety of tools? It was like a tool for like, let's say a mammoth, a tool for like a deer. Like, are there variations in the tools that you find in the field, or like, is it just like one type of tool? It's just that you have to build this huge complex tool in itself. That's like so complex that you don't have to have variety.
I guess an answer to that would be like, you can definitely shoot a deer with just a sharpened piece of wood as an arrow. You don't need a stone point on the end. The stone point just helps penetrate and cut better and leave like allow it to bleed more, and penetrate deeper. So if you have just a sharpened piece of wood, the hole gets plugged and it can't bleed as well. But if you have a big point that's serrated and it stabs into the animal, more blood's going to gush out and like it will die faster and more humanely. And I think basically all points are kind of designed to do that. Some cultures, based on like modern testing, definitely had more effective points in many ways, but they all get the job done. You could put like just a sharp piece of jagged rock at the end of an arrow, which used to happen in Africa like 70,000 years ago, and that would work too. But yeah, every culture had their own version, and there's a debate that you learn in archaeological theory, like style versus function. Is this point variation just stylistic or is it functional? And like, because it's all serves a function of shooting something, but maybe just in that culture they made it a specific way so that like it was very identifying. I'm not sure.
So any cool cultural differences? Like, did Europe had better tools than Asia? Like, any cultural differences that you have observed?
To say one's better than the other, I'm not sure. Like it depends on what purpose they're trying to serve. Like obviously some things are better than others.
Mhm.
But yeah, Europe had a very like the Levant as well, like Israel, Palestine, Syria, that area, like had and up into Europe, they used blade technology, which is taking a big piece of stone tool, shaping it into like what's called a core. They made it a cylinder shape, and then took an antler or a piece of rock and punched something off the side and made a razor blade with it. And they would use those razor blades for cutting, for shooting as arrowheads. They would shape those. Um, but in most of the world, they use like what's called bifacial technology, which is like you take the rock, you hit this side, flip it, hit the other, and it's bifacially reduced and has a continuous edge all the way around, and there's scarring all over the point. Whereas like a blade technology, it's pretty smooth on one end because it hasn't been worked, but it has a cutting edge all around. Um, so I'd say Europe has a very distinct technology. Native America, like the Americas before contact with Europeans, was like they were definitely by far the greatest stone tool workers, like I think in the world. Just excellent like craftsmanship. It's like artistic in a way.
Wow. In what sense? Like what are some features? Like you can go deep if you want, but
Yeah. Um, to elaborate on that, like Indigenous America was like a very unique and fascinating experiment in human evolution, like or human ingenuity, I'd say, not evolution. You have a whole two continents that are isolated from the rest of the humans on that planet, and they never had to move past the Stone Age, or really, or they used copper in some places, so you could say they were like Metal Age, but um, mostly like everything they made out of stone, everything they made out of wood functioned just fine. They clearly survived until people or North America or Europeans arrived in the Americas. And in that sense, you have people that adapted to the deserts, you have people adapting to jungles, people adapting to the woodlands, people adapting to the Arctic and the mountains. And like, it's just if the rest of the world hadn't progressed um, with metal and like domestic animals and building these giant cities like we have today, like the world would have looked like native North America. And because of that, everything, like all the stone tools used in native North America, are just endlessly various. They're very unique looking and distinct. Like I have a point right here that's like, oh, my thing is all that. That's like a regular looking arrowhead, right? Oh, sorry, it's all
it's really
blurry.
pointy. Yep.
Yeah, but then you have ones that are like this isn't a Mayan eccentric. It looks like a scorpion. Um, so like they just were excellent like artists at that, and you can especially see in like Mayan and Aztec societies or like Mexico societies, they had all that. They had cities, so they had time. Someone just spent all day flint knapping. Like they had a stonesmith, much like they had a cobbler or a weaver, and like they made incredibly cool stone tools like that because that was his specialty. They weren't running around foraging all day.
How long would it take to build that one like an elaborate stone tool for these people?
Um, Depends on your skill level. Like it would take me like a couple hours, but the guy who made me this scorpion shaped one made it while talking to me, not even looking at his hands, in 20 minutes. So I was just like,
That's
wow.
crazy. That
Yeah,
he has to be
it's
so skillful because that's all automatic. It's like driving a car.
yeah, it literally is. And for most of human history, making stone tools was just like it's a non-negotiable. You have to know how to do it to survive. So you just yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yes. I always I wonder at what point that skill became so monetizable and so scarce, and then we just forgot about it, and now it's not a
Yeah.
skill anymore. So pretty interesting stuff, dude.
It is in Denmark. They definitely they had copper and bronze age like knives, like daggers, but because like flint knapping was still like in people's minds, or they see spearheads all over the floor just like we do now, they would make those bronze knives but out of stone, just like for shits and giggles, I guess. And they're cool looking, and that's a cool way of seeing like okay, that technology was slowly fading out in favor of metal. And then we just kind of don't need to make stone tools anymore. We just use metal casts and like, things like that.
Yeah. Do you think there are any differences between species of apes and their stone tools?
Mm, there are like instances of like I know capuchins will, or is it macaques? I can't remember. Will take rocks to smash nuts and like break them open. Otters use stone tools sometimes to break things like clams open. Um, so like all animals kind of use a tool in a sense, or not all animals, like some. But there's studies where like they tried to show chimpanzees how to make a stone tool, like to crack it in half to cut rope or like to get a treat kind of thing. And none of them ever like figure it out on their own because they don't really need to. They're not that much of a meat eater.
Mhm.
And when they do eat meat, they just hold it and chew it like raw. But they could use it to cut the rope when they were taught to. But I don't think there's instances of chimpanzees or orangutans or bonobos like making them on their own, but they do use their own tools, like using leaves to drink water, using like a termite stick, things like that.
And their tools are more simpler, like maybe a rock to like hit something or
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, very simple. Yeah.
They still serve a
Thanks.
function, and it's still
Yeah.
like a tool in a sense. Yeah,
Yeah. This is so new to me, like this kind of science and maybe sociology. It's just so new to me that like I have to pause and think about this stuff because biology and like more molecular, like that's kind of stuff comes naturally, but like all this is definitely like very fascinating. I didn't have
sure.
much time to think about this until I was like done with college, honest to be honest with you, and until I started doing content creation. So this is like truly fascinating stuff. Um, but yeah, hunter gatherers. Um, what's up with the Neanderthals and like humans and how they interacted?
Yeah, I I say this to most people when we talk about Neanderthals is that classic Darwinian view, like that illustration of like a chimpanzee on its hands and knees crawling up to like a modern man, um, is not inaccurate, but I'd say it's misleading and false. Human evolution and cultural evolution too is not linear. It doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
And Africa is this giant melting pot of cultures and species that constantly interbreed with one another. Um, and we often see Neanderthals as like a step before us, and we advanced to what we are now because after Neanderthals, but that's not the case. Neanderthals are a very Near Eastern and European like variant of Homo sapien that just became so regionally distinct we see them differently. Um, but they in many ways used stone tools that were more complex than ours. Like it took a lot more forethought to make it. They would take a big rock and reduce it in a certain way, get rid of the rest of the rock that was perfectly useful, but get this giant blade that was sharp on all three sides out of the middle of it. And it's called a Lavoa technique. And they that requires you to either visualize what's inside the rock to get there, or they just memorize the steps of how to do it. But I'm sure if I gave you the rock right now, you wouldn't be able to figure it out. I
No,
couldn't do it either.
not in a
But like,
million years.
yeah. So like Neanderthals made that, and a lot of people see them as not human. But to me, like that's peak human. Like they could speak. Yeah, like you have to be able to talk to explain stone tools. You have to like think. Um, and they're just a regional variant of Homo sapiens. So when the rest of us Homo sapiens, like that were more modern or modern in the sense of like they genetically like evolved more towards what we are today, more distinct than Neanderthals when they got to Europe and Asia and met with Neanderthals, like I don't think they would have saw them as different. Like there's foxes, there's bison, there's birds, and then there's like, okay, these things are making fire, they're speaking, and they're having sex with each other. Like, oh, let me join. Like that's just how it happened. So, um, they might not have had as complex language as modern humans, not sure. But they had larger brains. Humans have a more scrunched brain, and therefore like your neural pathways are a little more like they're faster at connecting with each other. So we could probably think faster, calculate a little more. But
Oh, interesting.
yeah,
Never
and
thought
that's
about
probably
that.
what you think about stuff. Yeah,
Oh,
um, I could be wrong. I've that's my interpretation from reading things like that, but something to look into. Like it's just they had larger brains, but humans' brains were like a little more like they could compute a little more, I think.
yeah.
And so for all intents and purposes, like Neanderthals were human to them, I think, and that's evidenced by our genetic absorption of them.
Yeah. Did we have sex with them?
Yeah, like
You,
clearly.
yeah.
Um, whether it was like consensual and there was like courting involved, I don't know. I would say in most cases, unfortunately, probably not. But like there were probably like I guess I see it like it makes more sense if you find after walking for 2 weeks towards a new area and you're like, I don't know what animals live here, I don't know what foods are here, and like fungus is poisonous, like depending on which ones you eat, some berries. It makes more sense to talk and trade with the next group you find and ask about that than to just
Mhm.
outright kill them. Um,
Yeah.
so in that sense, Neanderthals and humans would have been doing that. And of course, if you're in a small hunter-gatherer band of 35 people, maybe less, you don't have that much genetic diversity to work with. So when you find another group of people, you're going to interbreed, trade sons, trade daughters, and like for land tenure and things and for goods, unfortunately, or they just, hung out around a campfire, shared stories for 2 weeks at a time at like the equinox or something, and just, got it on. Um, and I think that's the simplest explanation as to what happened.
Yeah. Well, so that's like a pro-social behavior aspect of on our side. Like if we were the species to like lay a hand or like lay a hand, like a friendly, like a like show friendly behavior towards them. But was there any difference in their stone tools and our stone tools? Like were they like you said, their stone tools were very elaborate and like they had these amazing capacity to like build a stone tool that was as similar, maybe better than ours. So did we try to learn from them, steal their tools, like manipulate them because we had a better language before, because we also had better brains? Like, what do you think happened in terms of like tool making and hunting?
Yeah, it was different for sure. The way Neanderthals hunted, they were more of a upfront and personal and used like thrusting spears, like you would think like a lance, um, or like
Okay.
a Greek sarissa kind of thing. And you can see evidence on their skeletons that they were like it's equivalent to what like a paper called them like a rodeo rider person. Because their skeletons are all busted up and there's like spinal fractures and a lot of them are missing fingers or broken fingers, and that could be a result of frostbite while they're missing it. But the broken fingers is they're falling a lot, getting hit by stuff. Is that with each other? Probably not. It's probably from hunting. Um, and or just being clumsy. I don't know, but uh, humans though used far tech like distance technologies, which like with the atlatl and bows later on, like they hunted at a distance, and they would have probably traded that with Neanderthals for sure. Um, but uh, that I hate using like more complex or more advanced in a sense, but like
Mhm.
our tools were just more sophisticated in a sense. Like Neanderthals had more sophisticated technology in some ways, with that technique I was talking about, but ours were fundamentally like more. I keep saying fundamentally; it's my new word today, but uh, they were more useful and all around like more like beneficial to use. And I think that led to why I wouldn't say Neanderthals went extinct. It's just that our modern population of humans were more adapted to sweeping through Europe and Asia quicker, and adapting better and establishing communities better. and just over time, like with interbreeding with Neanderthals, that version of human just kind of like dissipated.
Flourished.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't think there are any Neanderthals left in this world, or do we have DNA, like residual DNA of Neanderthals? I don't know how far back even like this was. Like there's this interaction of these two species.
Yeah. I would say there are more Neanderthals around today than there ever were, based on our absorption of that DNA. Um, and from when we left Africa 200, 100,000 years ago, and went into Europe and Asia, Neanderthals are already existing there because they were a remnant, like Homo erectus, like variation. We're all Homo erectus. Like Homo erectus hasn't disappeared either. It's just little advanced or like different genetic variations of them that specialized, which is what Neanderthals are, what Denisovans are, what the Hobbit was. And yeah, we just went out. So that DNA, Neanderthals go not extinct, but we stop seeing their technology and culture in the archaeological record about 40,000 years ago. So 200,000 to 40,000 years ago, we're interbreeding and doing what we were doing, and that kind of went away. But anybody outside of Africa, I think Native Americans have the most Neanderthal DNA because they were more isolated after like this big spread. Europeans and Asians next. Some Africans have Neanderthal DNA because it's backflow into Africa. But yeah, in that sense, like I have 2.2%, I think, which doesn't make me full Neanderthal, but it's just I have like it's not saying I have 98% like white American DNA and 2% Neanderthal. It's just like of your genes that make up my Irish and Scottish and French DNA, like 2.2% of that comes from Neanderthal as well. Yeah.
Very fascinating. And where can we get this test? Is it Ancestry DNA would do it or no?
I don't know if Ancestry might do it too, but mine's 23andMe. They show you on your reports. And like it
Neanderthals.
says that I have 18% more or I have more Neanderthal DNA than 18% of the sampled population, I think is what it says. Some people have like more than 90% of the population. It's cool.
Yeah, I did mine through Ancestry DNA, and it's kind of useless for me because I'm from India and it's just like 96%, basically 100% India, and they didn't give me any breakdown because like
Yeah.
there's like it's very useless to me because it was all 100% India. So I don't know why I did that, but I definitely want to try that Neanderthal like Ancestry and the other one that you mentioned, um, to like get maybe just be curious about this Neanderthal
Yeah.
DNA stuff. But
That's a bummer, man, because like Native Americans too, it just says you have 8% Native American, and like there's two continents full of people there that are very different. So it's like Native American. It's just unfortunate with the sample bias, but
yeah,
yeah, and like India is such a complex like history of migrations of people and things. Like hopefully it gets more sampled or
yeah,
worked
definitely
out. Yeah.
near future. Like
Mhm.
any more like more things you have that you want to share about on hunter gatherers and stuff. Be really super cool.
Yeah, I guess to relate it to dogs, like there's many ways to interpret the past archaeologically. There's like ways of looking at it through technological evolution, ways to look at it through linguistic differentiation. There's
Yeah.
biological differentiation, but like all that remains is stone tools for the most part. Like we only get so many bodies to study. Um, and because of that, stone tools are very linked to hunting and like tool utilization and food processing, that it just makes sense to look at like the base level understanding of humans to me when all you have is stone tools is to look at things through like an evolutionary lens. So all animals like have adaptations to survive and reproduce, and like you get food to keep living, to reproduce and to raise your young. So like were these stone tools sitting here because they liked to sit around the fire and tell stories and just make crafts? Probably not. They needed these tools to survive and gain calories to reproduce.
Mhm.
And in that sense, dogs, like the way they do understand like the English language, when like not the syntax or grammar or like anything complex like that, but they do understand their name. They understand like outside. When I say Jeep, my dog loses his mind and runs into the Jeep. But like they know those words because they associate it with food, and like, oh, if I sit, I get food for sitting when that word like that is said, that sound. So hunter gatherers like needing these calories to survive, wolves needing calories to survive. That language we speak with dogs began with that sharing of food resources, and like since then we still communicate with dogs through a language of like calories. And I think that's just, it's very reductionist, but I think it's fascinating because fundamentally that's like how it is, you know.
Yeah, I always wanted to read about the evolution of language and how that played a role in our interaction with dogs, our interaction with Neanderthals, and our interaction with like every other species that humans encountered in the past hundreds of thousands years ago. Do you know like when did we start not speaking fluently, but like when we started using voices as
Voices.
like our voices as a language? Like just I don't know how complex a language was back then. Like when we started becoming more upright, more human, like Homo erectus. Like
Mhm.
what was the language like, and how is it different compared to like Neanderthals and other like apes? Apes probably obviously don't have language, but like how was it different?
Yeah. uh
If you have any
Language in
idea.
the sense, yeah, I have some, but again, I'm not a linguistic anthropologist, but um like dogs have language. They speak, wolves talk to each other, they communicate, there's body language, there's things like whales obviously have a speech. They sing to each other. Dolphins like click. Chimpanzees have very like physical language, like they touch each other, they have like they'll smile, they'll put their hands out certain ways, and like that's language in a sense. But verbal language, you we know it was definitely around by Neanderthal times, so 100,000 years ago or so, because you have what's called a hyoid bone, and that hyoid bone allows the complex like focusing of airway through our mouth, and that allows our tongue to move the way it does to
Mhm.
manipulate that airflow to make speech. um but like the complex like diphthongs is what it's called, when like if I say the, or if I say like tomorrow, that like pushing your tongue up against your teeth might not have been, it could have just been like more like a like before. um but like there's click languages too, where it's just like and like the a group of people is called the kung, and like you click before you say it. It's a hunter-gatherer group in Africa. Like there's endless ways to communicate and
Wow.
put language. Yeah. But you to learn stone tools, like somebody has to say, take this, hit it here, this is going to do that, it
Yeah.
over, you suck, like things like that. And
You suck.
yeah. Right, or like you messed that up, or good job. That probably could have been done through grunts, but like I could only do that through grunts once I know how to do it.
Yeah.
So like at least a million years ago, I think we had to have some kind of language, and like I didn't understand that or didn't even think about that until I started playing with stone tools, because it there's no way to learn that without talking to each other.
No,
Uh,
definitely not. Because I was wondering when you were saying how they develop stone tools, like who, if there is like a young boy and the father is teaching the boy how to make stone tools, was there a language there, or was there like just plain like pointing or like grunts, sounds, clicks? Like is how are we as a species like able to inspire other people and like teach other people to do things? So that is just really fascinating. Even the origins of stuff is so unclear sometimes to us
mhm.
that it's just so much information that needs to be discovered.
it keeps me up at night for sure, like wondering like all these things, like what were their houses like, what was their language like, was it all click based, was it like hand signals, like just any amount, man. That's cool.
Yeah. And what sort of, I don't know, brain systems like are activated when we are like saying a very coherent sentence, and like how does that really, I don't know, how does that really how does that really like matched like years back? I don't really know how to explain it, but like how it's just that these things that we do in everyday life, it's just so autonomous and so uncontrolled that like sometimes I also pause, like, how does this even happen? Like, how are we driving a car? Like,
Yeah, it's complex.
yeah,
Um, you might know this more than me, but I mean, I guess like with neuroscience, but the like saying ow or like cat, rock, like those are, that's very simple. You're just naming something and a sound matches it to verbally say it. But to say like friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him, is like you have to then visualize ancient Rome, you then think Shakespeare, you think play,
yeah,
and that, where does that come from, man? Like that's just years and years and years of building upon the sound for rock or Rome, you know? Like
yeah.
it's fascinating to me.
It's just it's just unexplainable. Like we can all do these researches, like neuroscience experiments, and you can all like do stuff with stone tools, but like what are these physical maps in the brain that actually activate these like behaviors and how to do processes? That
Mhm.
just always keeps me up. Like I'll just always I just think about it like once a day or like multiple times a day. Like how is this like going on with us? But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, I don't know. It's just the remnants we have with what? With in respect to what? The
Uh,
language?
yeah, like neuroscience. I don't know, neuroscientologically, like what is like what are your thoughts on language?
My language, my thoughts on language are, so I took a course in high school. It was an AP class. It was human geography. And so
Okay.
I learned in that class, I learned a little bit about the language stuff and how different groups around the world have obviously their own languages. But I haven't really gone into like the evolution of language and how actually when I say evolution, I'm talking about like years before there were cultures. Cultures as we now know as like American culture, like European culture, Mexican culture. It's like the origin of like this first human who like first group of humans who were trying to like create language. That's what I'm really fascinated about. And I don't really actually, unfortunately, I don't know a lot about neuroscience of language too, because that's kind of a complex subject. Like no course offers, no, the colleges that I have looked at, their curriculum, like they don't really have those courses. So I have to really read books on them and research on
Hmm.
those topics because it's just, there are certain parts of the brain that generate language. But at what point, what was the point where the apes and humans, like we have similar brains, their structures are similar, but the neural firing and everything, it's so has to be so different that we can create language and they can't.
Hmm.
Essentially the same brains. I even heard that we have I don't know, it was we even though we have 1% of similar DNA, like the structure of the brains looks so similar, where they can't have language and we can.
Hmm.
And language is what sets us apart from great apes. So it's a very fascinating like subject, and I know nothing about it. So
It could be my internet very well. Let me see. Oh, there you are. Cool.
yeah, could be mine too.
No, I just got mine. Says it's unstable, but let's keep going. Cool. I'm here now, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Crap. Oh, okay, perfect. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I guess. What was the last thing you said? I can pick up from that.
last thing I said was we and the great apes have similar brain structures, but what makes us different is the language.
Yeah,
Like about anything, because languages could be so complex. You can, because it's so abstract, you can turn language in so many different ways. Yes, you can build stone tools and stuff. They'll look similar. Like yeah, like you said, chimps. We can make chimps learn how to do something, but like it's just the language part that's like so mind-boggling.
yeah. Have you seen the videos of chimps using like those computers where they touch pictograph things to explain things? Like,
I have heard of it. I haven't.
okay, yeah, I forget what it's called. I know Sue Savage is the anthropologist that does it, but she like it'll say outside, banana, like love, like things like that. I don't think love is on
Mhm.
there, but things, and they can click it and they know what it means. They also, you can teach them Arabic numerals and they know the order. And they can click on a screen the order that they popped up even when they're gone. Um, and I think that's really cool. But on top of that, have you heard of something called aphantasia?
No.
Okay. So I learned I have this. It is the inability to visualize like mentally. Um, and there was a guy who had brain surgery done, and they asked like, are there any complications? And he was like, I used to be able to picture stuff in my head, but now I can't. Like, so something in his brain like got rewired. Um, and like when everyone's like, picture yourself on a beach or like picture this, I've never been able to do that. I thought it was just metaphor. And I was like, I don't have that. So
Seriously.
I wonder, yeah. And dude, when I figured that out, like when I learned about that, I got like vertigo because like my whole world was changed. Um, because even like past relationships I've had, like fundamental communication issues we've had were because of that. Like she would explain her day and like she was surveying this canyon and went down and parked the truck here. I can't see
Wow.
that. I just have to remember the data. Um, so I wonder, like humans start making art about 40, 50,000 years ago all over Europe and Asia. Is it a way of like, I have this image in my head, I want to put it on the wall, or is it like I have this textual data in my head of like what a bison looks like. I can make it this way. Um, and that for me is like a language thing because it's like it changes how I think. And I wonder if more ancient humans didn't have that, but modern humans, like what makes us modern is the ability to visualize and like remember what that mountain range looked like
Right.
and things. But at the same time with those chimps, they can see on that screen when the numbers disappear and it just turns into squares. They know the order that they popped up. So like they can see it in their head. Um, so I find that fascinating.
Wow.
It's a
Yeah.
bummer because I can't picture things, but
Yeah, that's
um,
fascinating. So you can't visualize yourself on a beach just drinking a soda. You can't visualize that at all.
so when you said that, I get like a giant feeling of like yellow from like the sand. I can like smell salt if I think about it, and I can like I get a red, I guess, from like a Coca-Cola bottle. And I
Wow.
can taste Coke, but I can't see my like to third person view see myself. I can't do that.
So your
Um,
other senses, you're saying your other senses are activated apart from your visualization sense.
yes, if I really think hard about, like, I was in
No
therapy
way.
for a bit, and my therapist was like, all right, well, if you're anxious, picture yourself on a beach, tell me about it. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's dark. And like I couldn't like explain anything. But yeah, I can think about the smells, and when I think of people, I think of their color. Like my friend Katie, she's very like, she drinks wine a lot, she wears like red shirts a lot, and I just think red and like it associate that with Katie.
Can you picture
And
her
like
face? No.
if I think about it, I know like the textual features of her face. Like she's got a small little button nose, she's got blonde hair, but I can't see her face, if that makes sense. But I know who I'm thinking of. So when I dream,
Oh.
it's like I never see somebody's face in the dream, which I think is common for people, but I just know based on the presence, I know it's them. Um,
Wow.
it's it. Like I said, I got vertigo when I figured that out. I was like, whoa.
But I have to tell you, you are such an intelligent person if you have this. You have to be
Yeah,
so smart.
it,
That's
I appreciate
exceptional.
that. Thanks. It definitely makes me think of things in data, like uh books for sure. You'll appreciate this then. Like reading Sapiens or reading like a medical book or a book on science, I can read just fine because it's data. Like I remember like what they're talking about. But to read a novel, I can't read it because I lose focus because I can't picture like the room they're in or like things like that. Lord of the Rings I could read because I'd seen the movie and I know like what it looks like and stuff. But The Martian as well, I saw the movie, then I read the book. Or no, I read the book because I saw the trailer for the movie. So I had some reference of it. But like I noticed that a few years ago, like I haven't read a novel in probably 10 years because it's just
Mhm.
I get frustrated because I can't see what they're talking about. Uh it's cool.
Yeah. With the novel part, I don't read novels because I'm just generally not interested in stories.
Yeah.
But I have opposite of what you have. If I am doing something, like I was taking GREs before, like in this morning for graduate school. So I'm sitting here, but I'm visualizing all kinds of stuff while I'm taking the GRE. I was like, oh, I could be doing this content creation stuff. I'm visualizing our conversation, and then I'm visualizing, I don't know, my dinner, or I'm visualizing like vacation, like this all-inclusive resort that I went to. Like I'm just visualizing stuff. So my thing is totally different sometimes. I keep visualizing stuff
Hmm.
when I'm trying to do something that I don't want to do. I don't know if that's like a symptom of ADHD, but
Do you have that too? I do as well.
like ADHD,
Yeah. Like I got it pretty
I
bad.
I have thought about it before, considered fully that I have ADHD, but I'm not diagnosed with it, just because
Okay.
it does not really affect me in any way. Like like I can forget stuff sometimes, but generally does not affect me a lot because
Okay.
I feel like I'm doing things to mitigate it, like the symptoms,
To work
because
around it. Yeah.
it's also passed down. I think I looked at this study where ADHD is passed down 50% from your parent. Like it's the likelihood of you getting ADHD is 50% if your parent or parents has ADHD.
Okay.
So, and it also has this comorbidity with like obesity and like other different whether you call it metabolic problems or like uh other,
Impulse control.
yeah,
Yeah.
some other problems too. So it's highly like comorbid. So I have definitely considered about it and um not diagnosed, and I don't think I want to take medication for that, honestly.
Yeah. It works. It's just I don't want to like it really works, but I don't want to rely on it some days.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, um I learned I had that because I took a study at a psych lab and stuff, and I learned that the week I learned about the aphantasia thing. And I mean, I knew I had attention issues, and I knew like the hyper focus aspect of it. I can't focus on something unless I'm interested.
Oh
And
yeah,
like if I'm
totally.
interested, I can't pull away.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has that to a sense, but like I can tell my parents, like growing up, they were easily able to like pull away from something if they I needed their attention, in some cases. But with the aphantasia thing, and you were saying like you can constantly visualize stuff, which gets annoying because you can't focus on the GRE or whatever. um for me, it's like there's no pictures and there's no voice telling me things. It's just like it's feelings, and those feelings come so fast. And I think that's like with the comorbidities of it, you get anxiety and stuff. And like my anxiety isn't visual, it's just like I get a constant feeling of like embarrassment really quick, or fear really quick, or like
Hmm.
excitement. And like there's no pictures, there's no sounds, it's just like a feeling. And the way I remember things too is it's like I don't think in like words. It's not like, oh, I just walked into the room, I have to do this podcast with this guy. It's like I just know that. Like it's just like a feeling. And those like that knowing, I can't, it sounds so metaphysical, but like that knowing is just so fast in my head that like it's very hard to like grab one and focus on it. um if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's you have like this conversation has went from dogs to ADHD and to your problem of what's that word again? I can't remember that word.
um Aphantasia. Yeah.
Aphantasia.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff on it on YouTube. And
That is very
as
interesting.
soon as I saw someone explain what that was, I was like, oh my god, that's me.
Yeah.
um and I like art because I have all these thoughts and feelings that I want to express because I can't see them. So I have to like sit there and draw it, or like make it into a video or something to
Yeah.
visualize it better. Yeah. Um and I know the conversation shifted real hard, but I guess one thing, I don't mean to waste your time, but
Oh,
excited to talk to you about this. There's something, you know what ontology is? Like the what someone how they view the world or whatever.
on top. No, I'm familiar with entomology. I don't even know if I'm never mind, but no, no.
Ontology is just like the way one views the world. Like you're
Right.
a
Okay.
Christian person has an ontology that's different than a Jewish person, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And or a Hindu person. But the ontology, there I had to read a book called How Forests Think, and it's the ontological turn in anthropology, which essentially the book was just saying for a cultural anthropologist to fully understand someone's culture and study it, they have to understand their ontology, like how they perceive the world. Like I guess in a Judeo-Christian sense, we see like earth, there's heaven and like hell or whatever. And then there's like I see things just as like I kind of just get a picture of the map of the world, but I just that's the baseline, and then it zooms into like America or China. Um, and then I can access those files, I guess. But um, yeah, I think a fundamental thing that makes me so fascinated about anthropology is just wondering how they thought of things in the past. Like was one guy very analytical and thought of things zoological and categorized things like an ancient Darwin, like he just wrote stuff down or mental picture, or like were they very spiritual and like everything had a face or like a tree? It sounds so like woo woo, but like it really makes me so
Yeah.
appreciative of the past because like you want to know what they thought of stuff. Like
Yeah.
um was the sun a person, like, or was it just a star, like a hot ball of gas? Like I don't know.
This this topic like reminds me of how like writing is a reflection of thinking. And if the early humans like made stone tools, if stone tools are a reflection of how they thought as well. And that could be similar to like making art.
Wow. Yeah.
Because how you make a stone tool could be the bodily, physiological, neurological process may be similar to writing and making art.
That is, yeah, that's a fascinating point because like we were saying, every culture has a different style, but among those cultures, like I'm sure somebody had a more artistic or personal way of making it.
Yeah.
Um, and you saw the video where I was flint napping and I had like there's hitting it directly with direct percussion, but then I also had that stick that I held in my leg that like I hit it that pressed up and then I hit the stick. Um, that's my it's called indirect percussion. I have better aim when I do that. Like I concentrate the strike better, but some people can just do it with one rock and the other rock.
Mm,
That's my, I guess you could say, technique of it, but it is an art form in a sense. Like it's how I do it. That's a cool thought, man.
yeah. Because
Huh.
stone tools, you got to be really like it looks. You can just say it's really easy. You can just go out and like in the woods and get a flat piece of stone, but it's not that easy to really like sit there and like shave it off. Because I want to like I would definitely try this stuff because I love this. Like I love doing stuff outside, so I would
Mhm.
definitely try doing foot like what's it called foot napping,
Flint napping. Yeah,
flint napping.
it's
So I'm just
German. I
writing
forget
stuff
what it
down so I
means,
don't
but
forget.
yeah, man,
Sometimes I do forget though.
I do
But
all the time.
yeah. So flint napping. So I do really want to try this now because it's like it definitely would be a reflection of how I think. Because when you're starting to like learn things, when you're learning a language or something, you have your own patterns and your own techniques. So yeah.
Yeah, I will say, like as someone with ADHD, and if you believe you, in some form you may have it too, my
Mhm.
mind races so much, and I think like if I'm reading, I'll read a paragraph, but be thinking about dinner or something I said when I was 5, and like I don't absorb the word I just read. Or like if someone's talking to me, my mind goes all over it. I'm thinking about kangaroos. But like um when I'm flint napping, it's such a complex and ancient thing that's 3 million years ingrained in your head. It takes all of my concentration. Like I can listen to a podcast while I'm doing it, but I don't pull my head away from what I'm doing. I don't stop and think about something. I'm always doing it. And
Yeah.
it takes so much of your brain energy to do it. And that's why like I'm so appreciative of like paleoanthropology and like wondering how they were Neanderthals smart. Like what did they talk about or how did they think, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Because when you said like your all your concentration went into that stone making, that's me when I am like making a canvas painting or doing something really artistic that I like
Yeah.
because that's that hyper focus thing. Even like content creating, like when I'm making reels or YouTube videos and stuff, I get so hyper focused on that kind of stuff that I just forget about everything.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess cathartic is the word, or um, I don't know. But I'm glad you have that because until I found flint napping, it was like very hard to turn my brain off. You know,
Yeah.
um,
I'm
painting
glad
I
you
do that
found
as
it.
well. Appreciate it. It was hard.
Yeah, like you have to find something like that raises the question. Like I'm in medicine, all that healthcare. I'm trying to be I'm trying to go to graduate school. I'm going to like I want to do graduate schooling in physician assistant.
Mhm.
So I like psychiatry a lot, and so I always wonder about alternatives to medication. Like
Mhm.
I'm not against them because I don't have a lot of knowledge on these medications. Like I'm
Sure.
always thinking of ways to how can we like add certain activities to people's lives so that you don't have to rely on medication. And for me, it's just doing the things that I want to do. Like I really
Yeah.
want to do. And in a positive sense. Like I'm not sitting
Right.
in a gas station gambling all day. Obviously that would be fun. I never had gambling addiction, by the way, but like it's just that I wouldn't be like sitting there just betting my money on stupid things. It's just
Mhm.
that finding something that you really like and just being
That's
hyper
healthy.
focused on it that's healthy. And in terms of content creation, like you said, content creation, flint napping, like all that gave like your your content just took off because you were hyper focused. Without
Yeah.
that, like
It's
I
a
don't
it's a
think
special interest. Yeah. And
yeah.
I know that's very common with autism too, but I mean ADHD and autism are very linked, but it's like I have a niche interest that like I've focused at. Um, and I like that you bring up the alternative to medicine too, because like obviously giving a kid Ritalin or Adderall like helps them focus and stop running around the classroom. But like I always realized when my teacher when I was in math class was like, okay, just long division, like picture the one and like move it over, and there's like the little division box or whatever.
Hmm.
Couldn't do that. I had to write it down. Like I had to see it on paper. And
Hmm.
I still use my fingers to count. I can't like visualize the numbers in my head. So like some poor kid in like inner city Chicago that might think like that, that school system is completely ill prepared to teach him correctly, and he's not going to thrive in school because he is told he's not doing it right, or she's not doing it right, and he's probably not able to find what his, due to financial limitations, like what his passion is, or like maybe he loves history or anthropology or something. So like so many children in the past and today like are being taught wrong, and not wrong because like how do you teach a whole school? Just you have to have standardizations and things, but like I don't know, so many more people could be like brilliant geniuses if they like how many Van Goghs or how many like Einsteins or like Nikolai Teslas are sitting in a classroom, but they don't know how to utilize their brain correctly because the school system tells them to do it a different way, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
totally. And that kid, a kid who is marginalized, I can't say words today because I just out of it. But
you're
that
fine.
a kid that's marginalized like that, like in today's uh education system, like that kid will have problems soon, like later in life. Whether it is, I don't know, ADHD or like some other physical problems. Probably mental problems first,
Yeah.
because just that he is not fitting the standards of the system. Like he's not in that range, whatever that range is. So I don't know. It's just we can all like fight for change, but like I don't think it's ever gonna happen because
Yeah. Until every person knows like what we're talking about in this conversation, kind of, you know?
yeah, every
Yeah.
person in America, like no one, most people don't want to take steps. Like even parents, like it has to start with parents. Um, has to start with parents like understanding what their kid likes, what the kid is like, sitting down with them, like actually being a parent. And
Yeah.
that's what, because I never had that. Like I never had my parent like sitting down with me and asking me what I like, what I don't like, what my strengths or skills are. Like when you're building your resume, you're always asked to like highlight your strengths or like that sort of stuff. Like, but your parent for what, up to 18 is like your sole provider.
Hmm.
And like sometimes parents don't fulfill their responsibility. I have a lot of views on parenting too, but
Same. Um, like not to say I resent my parents in some ways for like
yeah.
the way I was raised, but like it it took me a minute to realize like they're just people too that now have another human being they created, or
Yeah.
two of them, because my brother, and my brother has like pretty severe autism. He's verbal, but like it's a lot to deal with.
Hmm.
Like they're just trying it out like the same way I would if I just had two kids right now. But it does, like you're saying, it bums me out. Like a lot of kids might have it way worse. I mean, not to say I had it bad, but like way worse than I did, and they're in that environment with an authoritarian parent who's very controlling, and like they're in timeout all the time for just expressing themselves, and
Hmm.
it's traumatic and it's sad to me. Um, I don't know, but like there's other, like your parents are good in our lives, but anthropologically, like the nuclear family in one household is very new. Before, like there's allo parenting where like other people care for the kids, like everybody's not everybody's your father, but every male in the group is your uncle.
Yeah.
They take care of the kids, and like the elder women usually take care of the kid. Like you have a lot more variation in how you're raised. But like now in like modern America, it's like you're in a family with, you're stuck with two parents usually, unless it's like a weird three thruple kind of parent situation. But like uh yeah, I don't know, it, like humans, our main adaptation is culture. That's how we adapt to our environments. And like the same way you get a scar on your arm if you hurt it, like that scar is still mentally in your brain too from like a traumatic event, and it's your body responding to an environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, psychology fascinates me too.
Yeah. But I like that we were going into anthropology because I so I'm obviously from Indian culture,
Mhm.
and you don't do you know anything about like our culture and everything? But if you know, you can like certainly chime in. But Indian culture is so like it's togetherness. It's a lot of
Mhm.
togetherness. Like in India, you would have like two families living in a house, and
Really?
yeah, eh, two families meaning, let's say you have like a, you would have a patriarchal head, and then you would have like then two sons, and those sons will live with the parents. And so the two sons family, for example, will live with their parents in one house. So like in that way, like two families living together. And then they would have like we would have these different festivals that would bring not only families together but like neighborhoods together. Like
Mhm.
it's a lot of togetherness. And after moving to the States, I was really skeptical. I got skeptical about my culture because when you have a lot of togetherness, everyone in your tribe has opinions on what to do with your life, like whether it's
Mhm.
dating, career, how to live financially. Like everyone has their own inputs. And then after moving here, seeing all this individuality, like two parents, one house, the grandparents live like separate.
Mhm.
So I kind of admired at first the American system, like this American way of living, like having less people in your group so that no one is like really judging you or criticizing you. But like now that I talk to you right now, there's no like middle ground. Like there needs to be a healthy cultural balance. There needs to be a healthy number of people that you have in your surrounding or in your culture. Because when I compare the two cultures, my I consider myself American, but the Indian culture and American culture, like it's one is like far all the way to like togetherness, and the other cult like the American culture is far to the way of individuality. And so like there needs to be like a middle point.
Yeah, that's fascinating, dude, because I'd always heard like Eastern, which I always just kind of attributed to China, was like it's very like we, not me.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that much. Like I really don't know that much about Indian culture. I respect it. It's like super old and cool, and Like all the festivals and stuff are really in the religions, but that's so interesting. Like we have multi-generational families here. Like my neighbors were Italian. The grandmother lived with them. The sister-in-law lived there too, but like that's not common here. Um, and that definitely would change your upbringing for sure.
Yeah, it it definitely changed. It definitely changes it. In my in my life, it it still has an effect on me, but I feel like I do have a healthy balance of people around me. It's not like I like to say no to events, like my family events sometimes, just so that I can work on like whatever is at front of me. Like GRE, for example. Like I had a family event that I had to skip because of preparing for GRE. And
Mm.
it's just that I in living in the States just allows me to say no more often compared to when I if I was living in India. So that gives me
Yeah.
flexibility too. That I really like about that. Um, it's just really it's gonna be really cool to see how like my kids are gonna live here. It's definitely gonna be like intermingling of two races. And so I just think about how that would shape this new American culture and how they would be in this, let's say 50 years from now, when like there's a lot of basically interracial breeding occurring.
Mhm.
That would be really cool too.
Yeah.
Because
Um,
there are a lot more people now who are willing to interbreed compared to even 20 years ago.
for
Um,
sure.
it's not also with the black, it's not with the also with the black communities, but also like Asian, Indian, like all over places. Like so that's really
Yeah.
fascinating too.
My girlfriend's Brazilian and
Yeah.
she like I don't know much about Brazil, but it's a very black country, a very indigenous, very white at the same time. And like
Mm,
all of their customs, she's got like there's Caribbean influence, there's African influence, there's
wow.
Portuguese influence, and like learning about that stuff every day and like little nuances of hers, it's like very different, but it's cool because like American culture to me is kind of boring in some ways. Like I'm just we do Christmas, we do my other family does Hanukkah, and then like you get the 4th of July. It's
Yeah.
not spicy. like
Yeah.
like Indian culture is fascinating to me, Brazilian in that sense. Yeah. So I am also looking forward to a very homogenized America as well.
Yeah. And like most white people I talk to, they always like say why like the American culture is a little bland, like a bland. Um, Other cultures have more flavor, and I can see how, because I have I have the best of both worlds sometimes because my girlfriend is white too. And I could see like the both worlds from my own point of view. And like it's
Mhm.
just so much information, like information overload sometimes. But I do like it. It's just that it's gonna be fascinating to see like the future. And I wish I'll hopefully I'll be around to view that. Um Homogenized America. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are at 1 hour and a half.
Are we? Dude, I was interviewed by NPR a few weeks ago, and I want to say like your interview was so much more entertaining, and you asked such great questions. Like I really enjoyed this. Like I
No
want to
way.
listen to it. Yeah.
Honestly, I after I had that brain freeze, I thought that oh I'm so shit. Like I
No, no.
shouldn't
Like
even be wasting your time here because
here's the
I
thing, man. The stuff that I post, I
yeah
get to cut all that out. I do the same thing. So
yeah
like you're fine. And this is how it works. Yeah.
yeah yeah. But like I was like I just took the GRE and I'm like so bummed out. I don't know if I'm gonna perform, but I'm just trying to be myself like any other advice. Like I'm just trying to like maintain this like good conversation, and so I appreciate it. But yeah, like anything you want to say about what are you doing right now currently? Like what are you up to?
Sure. Working on a video about the Columbian Exchange and like New World, like the old world clashing with the new, and like the foods and the animal exchange and languages and cultures. I find that just utterly fascinating. So it got me into anthropology in the beginning, I think. And I also went to an excavation where we dug up a mammoth last year in Wyoming. I'm going to that again in June and gonna film more, and I'll have a documentary out about that. I mean, like I'm making it. It's not gonna be like professional, but I'll put that on my YouTube. And then yeah, I'm also working on an apocalypse series because I love how apocalypse movies and shows explore
Oh,
like humanity.
I'm
Um,
watching The 100 right now again.
is that the one with the kids that go back to the planet?
Yeah,
Okay, I haven't seen that, but it's on my list of ones to watch now.
it's definitely like addictive. You're
Okay.
doing good, but it's addictive. For yeah, yeah. I'm all interested about it. So what? Do you have a production team and stuff, or how are you gonna?
No, man, it's just me. That's the limitation of it. I wish I could post videos every month or every 2 weeks, but I haven't posted since January because I sit here and I'm like, it's got to be perfect, and like I can't do it right. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just me for now. I'd love to get a production team. I really want to make um videos. I know, I'm sorry, I'm taking your time, but
no, you're good.
like stories of like it just the episode opens up and it says 12,000 BC India, and it's just a group of people existing and like having human problems. And the next episode's 5,000 years ago Australia, and then another one's like 12,000 years ago New York. And like seeing, I just want people to see those cultures, hear those languages, see the proper set design and the stone tools, but also the story is about like someone cheated on their wife or like somebody's brother died, and like more just to show modern audiences that it's we're the same. It's just different cultures and problem like time periods, you know. That would be my ideal what I'm working. I just don't know how to get there.
You'll
But
you'll you'll get there. You have a pretty large following on Instagram, so that makes you a good like I don't know, obviously an expert on this, but also like you might be able to find people like easily because when you have a larger following, you're more likely to like find people if you need help. Like I don't
yeah,
know,
that's
like
true.
people should actually volunteer sometimes. Like I would honestly, I would volunteer if you like. I don't know if you had the opportunity to like gather a bunch of newcomers on like who are just starting out. Like I don't know, that would be because I just started out content creating. Like I would do anything for free right now. Like I'm
Same.
not even thinking about money at all. Like it's just I'll do anything that interests me. So I don't care if it takes my time because my career path is so much different than like content creation anyway. So I'm not really worried about money at this point.
Yeah. Well, good, man. That's my mentality with it too. I mean, I quit my job to do it full time, and I would like more money to come in, but
Yeah.
I still like I just love talking about it, so I don't care. Like I'll do it for free.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see where you go, man. And I really appreciate this has been my favorite interview I've had so far. So just
No
in
way.
terms of connecting with somebody, let's
Yeah.
be friends, man. I think you're cool. Like this has been fun.
I think you're cool. I think you're so cool. I think that we had a great conversation. We not only touched on like the stuff that I want to talk about, but also we went into deeper stuff, and that really opens up this connection
Yeah,
more. So I definitely enjoyed this conversation. It was definitely more personal and interesting at the same time. So tell everyone
I
where
agree.
they could find you, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, man. My Instagram is ethnocyanology. I can't spell it off the top of my head, but if you just type in David Ian Howe, you'll find it. Also my personal Instagram, but you can find it through that one too. Um, David Ian Howe on TikTok, which is my largest following, but I like hate using TikTok. It's got like 200,000 people on there, mostly from like memes that I post. Um, and then YouTube is also David Ian Howe. And my coworkers and I have a podcast called A Life in Ruins, and it's just we interview other archaeologists and talk about archaeology. And yeah, that's about it.
That's about it. Well, any last advice to people in terms of mental health, in terms of chasing their dreams, in terms of finding their focus?
Yeah. If something interests you, and if you're a kid that asked a lot of questions and were told to shut up a lot, or like had teachers that are like, I don't know, look it up, follow that, and don't let someone tell you like that's boring. Like I started my Instagram and it blew up because my friends got sick of me talking about dogs every day. So I just made that happen. And I love my friends, but I wouldn't want to hear about climbing all day either. But that, and if you struggle with mental health, and like or anxiety, depression, or ADHD, like I've done therapy for years, and I would say I'm a more successful person because I have, and I know myself well, and because of that, and yeah, just follow your. It sounds like stupid advice, but follow your passions. It's cliche, and like one director I talked to for advice one time just said like you got to do it, and like I was like, but I want to do this, like what about the production? I want it to be in 4K. And he was like, just do it. Like, don't sit here and worry about the gear and any of that. So that'd be my advice.
That's awesome. That's what I'll take from this episode. And I hope you will be on again soon. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, man. I'd love to have you on ours at some point. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Bye.
Bye.